I lived alone for 3 years after my son disappeared. Then, on my 63rd birthday, he suddenly reappeared, sending me a $4,000 bottle of vodka. I couldn't drink it because of my heart condition. When he called and asked with a trembling voice, "Dad, how was the vodka?" I calmly replied, "I gave it to our family lawyer. He loved it." A horrified silence fell. Then he screamed, "Dad, what the hell did you do?" Just 24 hours later, what happened was beyond my imagination. Hey there! Thanks for joining me today. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you're always in the loop. Also, leave a comment below. I want to know where in the world you're watching from. Just a heads up, this story weaves together imagination and experience for both reflection and entertainment. While names and settings are crafted, the message at its core is something I hope resonates deeply with you. I'd been awake since 5:30 the way I always was these days. Old cop habits die hard. 25 years on the Ridgeview Force, 3 years retired, and my body still ran on the same clock. Up before dawn, coffee brewed by 6. Kate used to say I was allergic to sleep. She'd been right about most things. The doorbell rang at 7 sharp. I wasn't expecting anyone. My 63rd birthday wasn't the kind of occasion people remembered. Not anymore. Kate had always been the one who made a fuss, baking her lemon cake, inviting neighbors I barely knew. But she'd been gone 5 years now, and birthdays had become just another Tuesday in October. I set my coffee down and walked to the front door. Through the window, I saw a FedEx truck pulling away into the gray Oregon drizzle. On my porch sat a cardboard box, medium-sized, neat shipping label, no return address. I picked it up. Heavier than expected. The label read, Archer Dalton, 47 Maple Ridge Road, Ridgeview, OR 97401. Sender line blank. Just a tracking number and a date stamp from 2 days ago, Portland. Portland. A knot tightened in my gut. I hadn't heard from anyone in Portland in 3 years. I carried the box inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it. The rational part of my brain, the detective part, said to open it. The other part, the part that had learned silence from certain people, was a gift, told me to throw it in the trash. I grabbed a knife and slit the packing tape. Inside, nestled in foam peanuts, was a bottle. Not just any bottle. A work of art. Crystal-cut glass, shaped like a rectangular tower, the liquid inside a deep amber that caught the morning light. The label was black velvet, embossed with platinum lettering. Blackthorn Crystal Reserve, 1952. This wasn't a $50 liquor store pickup. This was the kind of bottle you kept locked behind glass. Tucked beneath was a small card, cream-colored, handwritten in ink I recognized before I even read the words. Happy birthday, Dad. I hope this makes up for lost time. Julian, my son's handwriting. Neat, precise. I hadn't seen it in 3 years, not since the last envelope he'd sent. A terse note explaining he was moving to Portland for work and wouldn't be able to visit. No phone calls, no holidays, no explanation. And now this. I picked up the bottle again, turning it slowly. The label said 1952. If that was accurate, this bottle was worth more than my truck. I pulled out my phone and searched the name. Blackthorn Crystal Reserve, 1952. Last known auction sale, $3,800. $3,800 for vodka. Julian was an IT specialist, decent money, but not throwaway, $4,000 on a birthday, gift money. Not the Julian I remembered. The kid who'd called me 2 years ago asking for a $500 loan to cover rent. The kid who'd never paid me back. I set the bottle down and stepped back. Something about this didn't sit right. Maybe it was the 3 years of silence. Maybe it was the fact that Julian had never been sentimental, never one for grand gestures. Or maybe it was just the old cop in me, the part that had learned to trust my gut when things felt off. And this felt off. I thought about Kate. She would have been thrilled. She would have opened the bottle right then, poured 2 glasses, toasted to reconciliation. She always believed Julian would come around, that the distance between us was just a phase. But Kate wasn't here. And I'd learned in the 5 years since cancer took her that time didn't fix everything. Sometimes it just made the cracks deeper. I glanced at the bottle again. Part of me wanted to crack it open, see if $3,800 tasted different than the $15 stuff I kept in the cabinet. But another part, the louder part, told me not to. Not yet. Not until I knew what this was really about. Instead, I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, David Whitmore. David had been my lawyer for 30 years. He was also one of the few people I still considered a friend. The phone rang twice before his voice came through, warm and familiar. "Archer, happy birthday, old man. What can I do for you?" "David, you got time this afternoon? I need to swing by your office. Talk about my will." There was a pause. "Your will, you feeling all right?" I looked down at the bottle on my table, amber light pooling around its base like a warning. "Just want to make sure everything's in order. Health's been not great since Kate. Figured it's time to update a few things." "Of course, come by around 4. I'll pull your file." Thanks, David. Oh, and one more thing. I'm bringing you a gift. Consider it a thank you for putting up with me all these years." David chuckled. "You don't need to do that. I insist." I hung up and stared at the bottle for another long moment. Then I carefully placed it back in the box, wrapped it in the foam peanuts, and sealed the lid. If Julian wanted me to drink this, he was going to be disappointed. By the time I climbed into my truck that afternoon, the rain had stopped leaving the streets slick and shining. I set the box on the passenger seat, buckled in, and turned the key. The engine coughed to life, and I pulled out of the driveway, heading toward downtown Ridgeview. The bottle sat beside me, silent and heavy, a question I wasn't ready to answer. 4 o'clock found me standing outside Whitmore and Associates, a 3-story brick building on Main and Oak. I grabbed the box, locked the truck, and pushed through the front door. David's secretary, Mary, looked up and smiled. "Mr. Dalton, David's expecting you. Go on back." I walked down the narrow hallway to David's office and knocked twice before stepping inside. David stood behind his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, a file folder open in front of him. He looked up and grinned. "Archer, good to see you. What's in the box?" I set it down on his desk carefully and met his eyes. "Vodka, expensive vodka from my son." David raised an eyebrow. "Julian, I thought you two weren't talking." "We're not. That's why I'm here." David studied me for a long moment, the kind of look he'd perfected over 30 years of lawyering. Patient, measured, waiting for the rest of the story. Then he turned his attention to the box, lifting the lid with careful precision. He pulled out the bottle and I watched his eyebrows climb. Blackthorn Crystal Reserve. He turned it slowly, light, catching on the cut glass edges. "Archer, this is, what, $3,000? $3,800 according to the internet." David let out a low whistle and set the bottle down gently. "And Julian sent you this out of the blue after 3 years. That's what the card said. Happy birthday, hope it makes up for lost time." David leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. "What do you think it means?" I shrugged, but the knot in my gut hadn't loosened. "I don't know. That's why I didn't drink it. That's why I'm giving it to you. Archer, consider it a thank you. You've been handling my paperwork for 3 decades. You deserve something nice." David shook his head, smiling. "You're paranoid. I'm careful, there's a difference." He picked up the bottle again, examined the label. "Well, if you insist, Margaret will kill me if she finds out I turned down a $4,000 bottle of vodka." He paused. "You said you wanted to talk about your will." "Yeah, pull the file. I want to make sure everything's current." David nodded and crossed to the tall steel cabinet in the corner, the kind with a combination lock and deadbolt. He spun the dial, pulled the door open, and retrieved a slim manila folder labeled Dalton Archer, Estate. He set it on the desk, opened it, and pulled out a sheaf of papers. My will, the one I'd signed back in 2020, just after Kate's diagnosis. David skimmed the first page, nodding. Estate divided equally between Julian and Emma contingent on your passing. Standard stuff. Anything you want to change? Just want to review it. Make sure it's still accurate. Let me check the system. David turned to his laptop, fingers moving across the keyboard. He pulled up the law firm's case management software. Let's see. Dalton Archer, estate planning. His fingers stopped moving. He leaned closer to the screen, squinting. Huh. What? David frowned, clicked through a few more screens. Then he turned the laptop toward me. On the monitor was a PDF. My will, or something that looked like it. Same header, same language, same format. But the date at the top read August 15th, 2024. And the distribution clause was different. All assets, properties, and holdings to be transferred in full to Julian Castellano. 100%. Not split. Not contingent. Just Julian. I stared at the screen, cold spreading through my chest. I didn't sign that. You didn't come in last month. No. I haven't been here since Kate's funeral arrangements. 4 years ago. David frowned, clicking to another window. There's an email here, October 8th, from archer.dalton.official@gmail.com. Says you updated the will, digitally signed it, electronically, asked me to prepare a hard copy. I don't have a Gmail account. My email's Yahoo. Has been for 20 years. David's frown deepened. He opened another drawer, pulled out a file folder labeled Pending Review. Inside was a printed copy of the same will, the August one, crisp and new. 3 versions, 3 places, all saying the same thing. All wrong? David set the paper down and met my eyes. Archer, someone's forging your documents. The words hung in the air like smoke. Julian, I said. David didn't argue. He just looked at the bottle of vodka sitting between us, and something shifted in his expression. No, we need to call IT, he said. Have them trace the system access check when that file was uploaded. If someone hacked our server... Do it! David reached for his phone, then stopped. Actually, let me have Mary handle it. She's better with the tech stuff. He stood, started toward the door, then paused. You know what, to hell with it. I've had a long day. Let me pour us a drink first, and then we'll get IT on the line. David, Archer, I've been working since 7 this morning. I just found out my system's been compromised. I'm having a drink. He walked to the small bar cart in the corner, grabbed 2 crystal tumblers, and brought them back to the desk. He broke the seal on the blackthorn bottle with a soft crack. The vodka poured smooth and clear. David filled both glasses, slid one toward me. To 30 years of friendship, he said. I didn't pick up the glass. I'm on heart medication. Can't mix it with alcohol. David raised an eyebrow. Since when? Since Kate. Blood pressure's been a mess. Doctor's orders. He shrugged, lifted his glass. More for me, then. He took a sip. Small, maybe an ounce. Then another. Smooth, he said, setting the glass down. Really smooth. No burn at all. I watched him, that knot in my gut twisting tighter. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. The forged will, the email, the $3,800 bottle showing up the same week someone decided to rewrite my estate plan. David picked up his phone. All right. Let me call Mary, have her get IT on this. He dialed, waited. Mary's voice came through tinny and distant. David explained the situation. Compromised system, forged documents, need a trace. Mary said she'd handle it first thing tomorrow morning. David thanked her and hung up. She'll have someone look at it in the morning. IT guy's already gone home. I nodded, but I didn't like the delay. We talked for another 10 minutes. David asked about my health, about managing the house alone. I gave him the same answers I always did. Fine managing. He told me about a case he'd just closed. I listened half-focused, my mind still circling back to that forged will. By the time I stood to leave, the sky outside had faded to dusk. "Thanks for this, David," I said, nodding toward the bottle. "You sure you don't want to take it back?" "I'm sure, enjoy it." David walked me to the door, shook my hand. "I'll let you know what IT finds." I nodded. I drove home, microwaved leftover chili, ate it standing at the counter. I thought about calling my old partner, Frank Miller, but I didn't have anything solid yet, just a bad feeling and a forged document. So I went to bed early, lay there staring at the ceiling. The call came at 9:47 p.m. I was half asleep when my phone lit up, vibrating against the nightstand. I squinted at the screen. Margaret Whitmore. I answered on the second ring. "Margaret." Her voice hit me like a fist. Ragged, breathless, broken. "Archer. Oh God, Archer, it's David. Something's wrong. We're at the hospital. They think he's been—" The word caught in her throat, strangled. Poisoned. I was out of bed before Margaret finished the sentence. My hands found my jeans and the dark keys on the nightstand. The phone stayed pressed to my ear as I moved through the house. Shoes, jacket, wallet. Margaret was still talking, words tumbling over each other. Ambulance, chest pain, racing heart. "I'm on my way," I said and hung up. The drive to Ridgeview General took 15 minutes through rain-slicked roads. My mind ran faster than the engine. David had drunk from that bottle. One glass, maybe two, and now he was in the hospital. Julian had sent that bottle. The pieces didn't fit yet, but the shape was starting to come clear. I pulled into the hospital lot just after 10 and jogged toward the entrance. Fluorescent lights hit me like a slap. Too bright, too sterile. The ER waiting room smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. Margaret stood near the nurse's station, arms wrapped around herself, face pale. She saw me and crossed the room. "Archer." Her voice cracked. "They won't tell me anything." "What happened?" "We were watching TV. He said he felt dizzy. Then he grabbed his chest, said his heart was racing. I called 911. "Is he conscious?" "He was, but they took him back an hour ago. A nurse walked by, and I flagged her down." "David Whitmore. Came in about an hour ago. Cardiac issue. Can you tell us anything?" The nurse glanced at her clipboard. "Are you family?" "I'm his wife," Margaret said. "The doctor will update you soon. Right now, Mr. Whitmore is stable, but we're running a full toxicology screen." "A toxicology, huh?" Margaret's voice went thin. "On standard procedure, rapid heart rate, arrhythmia, no prior cardiac history. We have to rule out contamination. Contamination. Not poisoned. Not yet. But close enough." The nurse disappeared through the double doors. Margaret sank into a plastic chair. I stayed standing, watching the ER entrance. That's when I saw the uniform. Officer Patel stepped through the automatic doors, rain beating on his jacket, notebook already in hand. I recognized him. Younger guy, sharp eyes, the kind who didn't miss details. He walked straight to me. "Mr. Dalton." "Officer, I need to ask you a few questions. You saw Mr. Whitmore earlier today, around 4, at his office." Patel flipped open his notebook. "Did you give Mr. Whitmore anything, food, drink?" I kept my voice steady. "I gave him a bottle of vodka. A gift." Patel's pen stopped. "A gift? Expensive bottle. $3,800. Figured he'd earned it after 30 years. Did you drink any?" "No. I'm on heart medication. Can't mix it with alcohol." Patel wrote that down. "And Mr. Whitmore drank from this bottle. He had a glass, maybe 2. Do you still have it?" "No, I left it with him." Patel nodded, closed his notebook. "We'll collect it as evidence. And Mr. Dalton, don't leave town for the next few days." The words landed like a fist. "You think I did this? You gave Mr. Whitmore alcohol, and now he's in the ER with symptoms consistent with ingestion of a toxic substance. Right now, you're a person of interest." Person of interest. Cops speak for suspect they couldn't arrest yet. I wanted to tell him about Julian, about the forged will, about the bottle that had shown up out of nowhere. but I'd been a cop long enough to know how this looked. Man gives lawyer expensive gift. Lawyer ends up in the hospital. Man claims he didn't drink any himself. It looked bad. I'll be around, I said. Patel left. I sat beside Margaret and waited. The ER doctor came out just before midnight. Young Scrub's wrinkled exhaustion carved into his face. David was stable, heart rate under control. Toxicology results would take another day or two. David was being moved to the ICU. Margaret asked if she could see him. The doctor nodded and she followed him through the double doors. I stayed another hour, but there was nothing more I could do. No more answers. So I left. The streets were empty and slick under the streetlights. I drove home on autopilot, parked, walked inside. The house was cold. I didn't turn on the heat. Just walked to the kitchen and sat at the table. The same table where I'd opened that box this morning. The same table where the bottle had sat amber and gleaming. I pulled a notebook from the drawer, the kind I used to carry on the job, small and spiral-bound, and opened it to the first blank page. October 12th, 2024. 1:30 a.m. David drank the vodka I gave him. Now he's in the hospital. The cops think I did it. They took the bottle as evidence. Told me not to leave town. But Julian sent that bottle. Julian, who hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. Julian, who forged my will and hacked David's system. Coincidence. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that bottle, crystal-cut amber light, Julian's handwriting on the card. I saw David lifting the glass, taking that first sip, smiling. Smooth, he'd said. Really smooth. And now he was in the ICU. I rolled over, stared at the ceiling. The rain started again, tapping against the window like fingernails. Somewhere in Portland, Julian was asleep in his condo. Or maybe he wasn't sleeping. Maybe he was awake too, wondering if it had worked. If I'd drunk from that bottle. If I was the one in the hospital instead of David. The thought settled in my gut like a stone. The next day dragged. I stayed home, avoided the phone, tried to keep busy. Changed the oil in my truck. Fixed the loose hinge on the kitchen cabinet. Anything to keep my hands moving, my mind from circling back to that bottle, that hospital, that look in Officer Patel's eyes. Person of interest? I was in the garage wiping grease off my hands when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, squinted at the screen. Frank Miller. My old partner. 25 years on the force together, retired 3 years before I did. Last I'd heard, he'd taken a job as a detective with the county sheriff's office. We hadn't spoken in months, I answered. Archer. Frank's voice, familiar but not friendly. Not anymore. Frank. We need to talk. I wiped the grease off my hands, grabbed my jacket, and headed downtown. The Ridgeview Police Department sat on the corner of 3rd and Elm, a squat brick building unchanged since I'd walked through its doors as a rookie 40 years ago. The parking lot was half empty when I pulled in. I'd been on the other side of this plenty of times, bringing people in, asking questions, watching them sweat under fluorescent lights. I'd never thought I'd be the one answering for something I didn't do, but here I was. I walked through the front doors. The desk sergeant nodded toward the hallway. Detective Miller's expecting you. 3rd door on the left. The hallway smelled the same. Old coffee floor wax, the faint tang of sweat and stress. I reached the 3rd door, knocked twice, and pushed it open. Frank sat behind a gray metal desk, reading glasses on his nose, a file folder open. He looked up, and for a second, I saw the man I'd worked with for 2 decades. Steady, reliable. But then his expression shifted into something more official. Archer, sit down. I pulled out the chair. The room was small, windowless. A recorder sat on the desk between us, red light already blinking. You're recording this. Standard procedure. You know how it works. I did. Standard procedure meant they were building a case. Frank leaned back. Toxicology came back on the vodka you gave David Whitmore. I waited. Aconitine. Ever heard of it? No. So it's a toxin. Comes from a plant called wolfsbane, one of the most lethal plant-based substances known to man. Causes cardiac arrhythmia, respiratory failure, can stop a heart in under an hour. The words landed heavy, my gut twisted. The bottle you gave David had enough aconitine to kill someone. David's alive because he only drank about 50 milliliters. If he'd finished the glass, we'd be having a very different conversation. I swallowed. I didn't know. I believe you, but I need you to help me understand how a bottle of $3,800 vodka ended up laced with poison and in your hands. I met his eyes. Julian sent it to me. Frank's expression didn't change, but I saw the flicker of interest. Your son, my son, who I haven't heard from in 3 years, who sent me that bottle on my birthday out of nowhere with a card saying, "Hope this makes up for lost time." Do you still have the card, the box? Yeah, at my house. Frank nodded, made a note. We'll need those. Handwriting analysis, fingerprints, anything that ties Julian to the bottle. You'll have them. Frank leaned forward. Archer, I've known you a long time. I know you didn't try to harm David, but right now the evidence says you gave him a contaminated bottle. That makes you a suspect. What I need is proof that someone else is responsible. And if that someone is Julian, I need a motive. I took a breath. David told me something before he drank from that bottle. He found discrepancies in my will. 3 versions. One in his safe, one digital one sent via email. The digital and email versions were forged. Someone hacked his system, changed my estate plan to leave everything to Julian. Frank's pen stopped moving. David said this right before he opened the bottle. He said we needed to call IT, have them trace the access. Frank picked up his phone, dialed. A brief conversation. He hung up and looked at me. Margaret confirmed it. David told her the same thing before he lost consciousness. Said your will had been tampered with. Julian, we're looking into it. But Archer, even if Julian forged your will, that doesn't prove he sent the vodka. We need a direct connection. Check the FedEx tracking, the sender address, Julian's condo in Portland. Frank made another note. We will. He closed the file, but didn't stand. Archer, there's something else. You said you didn't drink from the bottle because you're on heart medication. What medication? Nitroglycerin, for blood pressure. Why? When's the last time you took it? 2 days ago, morning. Why? Frank's jaw tightened. I want you to have your doctor check that prescription. Make sure it's what it's supposed to be. The implication hit me. You think Julian tampered with my meds. I think if Julian sent you a bottle laced with poison, he's not above switching out your pills. I stood. I'll call Dr. Brennan. Frank walked me to the door. Get me those boxes, the card, anything Julian touched. And Archer, be careful. If your son's behind this, you're still a target. I left the station, climbed into my truck, and sat there with the engine running. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from anger. I pulled out my phone and called Dr. Brennan. He answered on the 3rd ring. Archer, what can I do for you? I need you to test my nitroglycerin prescription. Check if it's been tampered with. A pause. Why? Just do it, please. All right, bring the bottle by my office. I'll run a sample through the lab. I drove home, grabbed the pill bottle from the bathroom cabinet, and drove straight to Brennan's clinic. He took the bottle and disappeared into the back. I sat in the waiting room, staring at a cholesterol poster, trying to figure out when it had all gone wrong with Julian. Brennan came back an hour later, face grim. Archer, this isn't nitroglycerin. I stood. What is it? Calcium channel blocker. Different class entirely. If you'd taken this during a cardiac episode, it would have dropped your blood pressure dangerously low. You could have lost consciousness. Maybe worse. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the chair. Someone switched your medication. Brennan nodded. I'm prescribing you a new bottle. Real nitroglycerin. Don't take anything from that old container. And Archer, you need to tell the police. I called Frank from the parking lot, told him what Brennan had found. Frank said he'd send someone to collect the fake pills as evidence. I drove home in a fog, walked inside. The house felt colder than it should have. I sat at the kitchen table, pulled out my notebook and wrote, October 14th, 2024, 6 p.m. Frank confirmed the vodka was laced with aconitine. Lethal dose. David survived because he only drank 50 milliliters. Julian sent that bottle. Julian forged my will. Julian hacked David's system, and now I know. Julian switched my heart medication. He didn't just want to harm David, he wanted to kill me. But why? I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I closed the notebook and sat in the silence. The phone rang just after 7 the next evening. I was heating up leftover soup when the screen lit up. Unknown number, Portland area code. I answered. Silence on the other end. Then quiet and calm, a voice I hadn't heard in 3 years. Dad, did you like my gift? My finger hit the record button before I even registered the movement. Old instinct. 25 years on the force had taught me to document everything, especially when something felt wrong. And this, Julian's voice after 3 years of silence asking if I'd liked his gift, felt very wrong. I kept my tone neutral. Julian, you didn't answer my question. I set the soup pot down, moved to the living room where the signal was clearer. No, I didn't drink it. A pause. Brief, but I heard it. The kind that comes when someone's recalculating. Why not? I'm on medication. Can't mix it with alcohol. You'd know that if you'd bothered to call in the past 3 years. The words came out sharper than intended, but I didn't take them back. Another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted. Less casual, more measured. So what did you do with it? I gave it to a friend. Silence. 3 full seconds of it. Then Julian's voice came back sharper now. Careful. Which friend? And there it was. Julian hadn't asked which friend before. He'd asked what I'd done with it. But now suddenly he needed to know who. That wasn't curiosity. That was panic. I didn't answer right away. Let the question hang there. Why do you ask? Oh, just curious, Dad. That bottle cost me a lot. I'd hate for it to go to waste. Too deliberate. Too interested. If Julian had really just sent an expensive gift, he wouldn't care where it ended up. But he did care. Which meant he knew. He appreciated it. I said, keeping my voice even. Good. That's good. I hope he enjoyed every drop. The words landed cold. Not warm, not friendly. Then the line went dead. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the darkened window. My mind was running at full speed, piecing together what I'd just heard. Julian hadn't asked who the friend was until I said I'd given the bottle away. That pause, those 3 seconds of silence, that had been surprise. Maybe shock, and then the follow-up question, carefully phrased, which friend? Julian knew someone had drunk from that bottle. Maybe he'd seen it in the news. Ridgeview was small enough that a prominent lawyer in the ER would have made the local paper. Or maybe Julian had other ways of knowing. Either way, Julian knew, and he knew it wasn't me. I pulled up Frank Miller's contact and hit dial. He answered on the second ring. Archer, what's wrong? Julian just called. A beat of silence. Your son? Yeah. Asked if I liked the gift. Asked if I'd drunk from the bottle. When I told him I gave it to a friend, he went quiet for 3 seconds. Then he asked which friend. What did you tell him? Nothing. But Frank, he knows. He knows someone drank from it, and he knows it wasn't me. Did you record the call? Every word. Send it to me right now. I hung up, pulled up the recording file, attached it to an email, and hit send. Then I set the phone down on the counter and stood there, hands flat against the cold tile, breathing slow and steady. Julian had called. After 3 years of silence, after sending poison, after forging my will and hacking David's law firm, Julian had called to check if his plan had worked. And when he found out it hadn't, When he realized I was still alive, he'd wanted to know who'd taken my place. This wasn't over. I moved through the house methodically, checking every window latch, every door lock. Everything was secure. But secure didn't mean safe. I needed to know if someone tried to get in. In the garage, I found an old spool of black thread tucked in Kate's sewing kit. Thin, strong. I cut a piece about 2 feet long, carried it to the front door, and stretched it across the threshold at ankle height. I tied one end to the doorknob, pulled it taut, and tied the other end to the coat rack just inside the entryway. Tight enough to hold tension, loose enough to snap if someone pushed the door open even an inch. Old detective trick. Simple, effective. Then I grabbed the security camera I'd bought 2 years ago and never installed. Motion activated, but I'd never even put batteries in it. But it looked real enough from a distance. Black casing, little red light lens pointed outward. I peeled off the backing and stuck it in the corner of the porch overhang angled toward the driveway. If someone came looking, they'd see it. And they'd think I was watching. By the time I finished, the sun had set completely. The street was dark except for the glow of the street light 2 houses down. I stood on my porch, scanning the shadows between the trees, looking for movement. Nothing. I went inside, locked the door, and made coffee I didn't really want. Sat at the kitchen table. The facts were clear enough. Julian had sent poison. Julian had called to see if it worked. Julian knew it hadn't. And sooner or later, Julian would try again. I finished the coffee, rinsed the cup, and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house settling, every branch scraping against the siding, pulled me halfway back to waking. I kept my phone on the nightstand, volume up one ear, always listening for the sound of a door opening, the snap of thread breaking, footsteps crossing my living room floor. But nothing came. When dawn broke gray and cold through my window, I was already awake. I swung my legs out of bed, pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt, and padded barefoot down the hallway to the front door. The thread was gone, not just broken, gone. Snapped clean in the middle, both ends dangling loose. One still tied to the doorknob, the other hanging limp from the coat rack. Someone had opened my front door, stepped inside, and left. I turned, slowly looked out through the window at the porch. The camera was still there, mounted in the corner, but it had been moved. Just a few degrees to the left, angled away from the driveway, now pointing at nothing. Whoever had come in last night had known exactly what to look for. I stood there in the doorway, cold October air rolling in around my bare feet, and stared at that broken thread swaying gently in the breeze. Julian hadn't just called to check on me. He'd sent someone to finish what the vodka hadn't. I didn't touch the thread. First rule of preserving a scene: don't contaminate it. I backed away from the doorway, grabbed my phone, and dialed Frank Miller. He answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. Archer, it's 6 in the morning. Someone broke into my house last night. A pause. I heard him sit up. You sure? I set a tripwire. Black thread across the doorframe. It's snapped clean. And the camera I mounted on the porch. It's been moved. Angled away from the driveway now. You hurt? No. Whoever it was came in and left. Didn't take anything. Just wanted me to know they could. I'll be there in 2 hours. Don't touch anything. I know the drill. I hung up and stood in the hallway, scanning the living room. Everything looked the same. Couch cushions undisturbed. TV remote on the coffee table. Kate's quilt folded over the armchair. Nothing missing, nothing out of place. But someone had been here, walking through my house while I slept. I moved through each room, slowly checking. Kitchen, clean. Bathroom, towel hanging where I'd left it. Bedroom, bed unmade, closet door half open. Garage. Truck keys on the hook toolbox undisturbed. Whoever had come in hadn't been looking to steal. They'd been checking to see if I was home, or sending a message, we can reach you whenever we want. I crouched by the front door, examined the lock. No scratches. No signs of forced entry. Which meant either they'd picked it, not hard with a lock this old, or they had a key. That thought settled cold in my gut. I made coffee, strong black. Sat at the kitchen table and waited, watching the clock crawl toward 8. Frank's unmarked sedan crunched into my driveway just after 8. I met him at the door, stepped aside so he could see the dangling thread. He knelt, pulled a small flashlight from his jacket, and swept the beam across the threshold. No footprints. Ground's too dry. Camera, show me. We stepped onto the porch. Frank examined the adhesive mount, the angle of the lens. Moved deliberately. This wasn't some kid. Whoever did this knew what they were looking for. Professional or experienced. Could be Julian hired someone. Could be Julian himself, though I doubt it. He's not the hands-on type. Frank straightened, looked at me. You sent me that recording. Julian's call. Yeah. I've listened to it 3 times. That pause when you said you gave the bottle to a friend. That's not curiosity, Archer. That's panic. I know. And the follow-up. Which friend? Julian's trying to figure out if his plan worked. Frank pulled a file folder from his car, flipped it open. Inside was the birthday card Julian had sent, sealed in a plastic evidence bag, next to a photocopy of an old tax return with Julian's signature. Forensic document examiner compared the handwriting. 97% match. Same slant, same pressure, same loops. Julian wrote that card. Relief washed over me. Now it was documented. Official. David woke up yesterday afternoon. Frank continued. Talked to Margaret, then talked to us. Confirmed everything. You gave him the vodka as a gift. You two were discussing your will. He drank from the bottle you left before he collapsed. He remembers the conversation about the forged documents, too. So I'm clear. Officially, yes. We're building a case against Julian. Attempted harm, fraud, computer crimes, identity theft. IT forensics is going through David's law firm server. Early results show unauthorized remote access from an IP address in Portland, logged through an old employee account that should have been deactivated months ago. Julian, we're tracing the IP to a physical address. Should have it by end of day. Frank closed the folder. Archer, I'm putting a patrol unit on your street. Just drive-bys twice a night. And do me a favor. Upgrade your security. That thread's clever, but it's not going to stop anyone who's determined. Get a real alarm system. Change your locks. Already planning on it. Frank left just before 10, taking the broken thread, the birthday card, the FedEx box, and the bottle of fake medication. I watched his sedan disappear, then went inside and locked the door. First stop, hardware store. I bought a basic alarm system. Motion sensors, door and window contacts, a control panel with a keypad. $50 self-install. Nothing fancy, but loud. Also grabbed new deadbolts and reinforced strike plates. By the time I got home, it was almost noon. I spent the next 3 hours installing everything. Sensors on both doors. Motion detector in the hallway. Keypad mounted by the entryway. New deadbolt screws drilled deep into the frames. When I finished, I armed the system and opened the front door to test it. The alarm shrieked. High-pitched, angry, loud enough to make my ears ring. I punched in the code and it cut off. Good enough. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my notebook and wrote. October 16th, 2024. 3 p.m. Someone broke in last night. Snapped my thread, moved the camera. Frank confirmed it. I'm officially clear. Handwriting matches Julian's. David's awake confirmed my story. IT forensics found evidence of a hack from a Portland IP. Julian's not just trying to steal my estate. He's making sure I don't survive long enough to stop him. I closed the notebook and sat there thinking about next steps. Tomorrow I'd call a professional locksmith. Tomorrow I'd talk to Frank about restraining orders. But tonight I just needed to sleep. I didn't. The next morning I woke just before dawn. Made coffee, sat at the table, watched the sky turn from black to gray. Just after 9, I walked to the front door to grab the newspaper. There was an envelope on my porch. Plain white. No address, no stamp, no name. Just sitting there on the welcome mat. I stared at it for a long moment, pulse ticking faster. Then I pulled out my phone, took a photo, and called Frank Miller. The envelope lay where I'd set it, its edges crisp against the kitchen counter. Morning light slanted through the window as I slid one finger under the flap and pulled out a single photograph, black and white, grainy. My house. The image had been taken from the gravel drive framing the front porch. The windows dark, the old maple casting skeletal shadows across the siding. In the bottom right corner, white digital numerals read 11:47 p.m. 16th October 2024. Last night, an hour and a half after I'd locked every door and installed the motion sensor, I flipped the photograph over. No message, no signature. Just the image of my home captured by someone who had stood outside in the dark while I slept. My hand tightened around the counter. For 30 years, I'd been the one doing surveil Archer, holding the camera, documenting evidence. Now I was the subject, the target. I pulled out my phone and called Frank Miller. "Sure." His voice was thick with sleep. "Check your email. I'm scanning it now." "What is it?" "A photograph. My house. Time-stamped 11:47 last night." A pause, then the creak of bed springs. "You're telling me someone walked your property an hour after you installed that alarm?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." "Did the sensor trigger?" "No." Another pause. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. Don't touch the envelope." I set the phone down and stared at the photograph again. The angle was deliberate. Not a casual snapshot, but a composed frame, the kind a professional would take. Or someone who had studied under one. Julian had been 12 when I'd taught him how to use my old Nikon, how to adjust the aperture for low-light shots. We'd spent a summer stalking deer in the hills east of Ridgeview, him crouched beside me as I whispered instructions. That boy was gone. In his place stood a man who sent poisoned vodka and forged wills, who swapped medication, and hired thugs who stood in my driveway at midnight and took pictures. By 10:30, Frank had left, with the photograph sealed in an evidence bag. I stood at the kitchen sink rinsing my mug when the first wave hit. A crushing weight across my chest, radiating down my left arm like molten lead. I gripped the counter, gasping, my vision narrowing. Nitroglycerin. I needed nitroglycerin. My jacket hung by the door. I staggered toward it, each step an effort, my lungs refusing to draw a full breath. My fingers fumbled in the pocket closed around the small brown bottle, twisted the cap, then stopped. Dr. Brennan's voice echoed in my head. "The pills in your original bottle were fake. If you'd taken one during an episode." I set the bottle on the counter, pulled my phone from my other pocket with shaking hands, and dialed. "Dr. Brennan, it's Archer Dalton. I need help." "Archer, what's wrong?" "Chest pain. Bad. Can't take the pills." "They might be." Don't take anything. I'm on my way. Sit down and stay on the line." I lowered myself into the kitchen chair, phone pressed to my ear, and focused on breathing. In, out, in, out. The pain clawed at my ribs, each beat of my heart a hammer blow. "Still there, Archer?" "Yeah. Good. I'm turning onto your street now." Dr. Brennan arrived at 11, black medical bag in hand, his graying hair disheveled. He knelt beside my chair, pressed 2 fingers to my wrist, counted silently. My pulse is elevated but steady. "Here." He handed me a small white tablet and a glass of water. "This is sublingual nitroglycerin. I pulled it fresh from the hospital pharmacy an hour ago. Put it under your tongue." I obeyed. The tablet tasted bitter, and within seconds the vice around my chest began to ease. I drew a full breath, then another. "Better." I nodded, unable to speak. He pulled a chair opposite me and set a clear plastic evidence bag on the table. Inside lay the brown prescription bottle I'd carried for 3 months. "Lab confirmed it yesterday," he said quietly. "Amlodipine, a calcium channel blocker. If you'd taken one of these during acute angina, your blood pressure would have dropped so fast, your brain wouldn't have gotten enough oxygen. You'd have lost consciousness in under 2 minutes. At your age, with your history, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Who would swap my medication? I asked, though I already knew. Someone with access to your house. Someone who knows you have a heart condition. Someone who wanted it to look like natural causes. Julian, Dr. Brennan wrote a prescription for a fresh 90-day supply, showed me the tamper-proof seal on the new bottle, and made me promise to call 911 if the pain returned. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my journal. October 17th, 2024, 11:45 a.m. This morning, I received a photograph of my house time-stamped 11:47 p.m. last night. At 10:30, I had a severe angina attack. I reached for my nitroglycerin, but remembered Dr. Brennan's warning. The lab report is clear the original pills were amlodipine, not nitroglycerin. If I had taken one during the attack, I might not have survived. Julian planned every step: the poisoned vodka, the forged will, the swapped medication. He is trying to make sure I do not live long enough to stop him. I closed the notebook, poured a second glass of water, and tried to convince myself the new locks and alarm system would be enough. At 2:34 in the morning, I woke to the sound of footsteps. Not outside, inside, slow, deliberate. Moving through the living room toward the hallway where my bedroom door stood half open, I lay frozen beneath the quilt, listening. The alarm remained silent. No beep. No siren. Nothing. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. The footsteps stopped. A shadow passed beneath the narrow gap at the bottom of my bedroom door. Then a voice, low and unfamiliar, spoke from the other side. "Mr. Dalton, we need to talk." I kept my service revolver in the nightstand drawer, a Smith & Wesson Model 10 I'd carried for 23 years on the force. My fingers found the grip in the dark, cool steel against my palm, and I eased out of bed without making a sound. Kate's quilt slid off my shoulders as I moved toward the door, each step deliberate, the floorboards silent beneath my bare feet. The voice had come from downstairs. Calm. Patient. Not the frantic urgency of a burglar caught mid-act, but the measured tone of someone who had all the time in the world. I edged into the hallway, back pressed against the wall, revolver raised. The glow from the kitchen nightlight spilled across the hardwood. I descended slowly, keeping to the outside edge of each step, my breath shallow and controlled. At the bottom, I paused, listening. The living room lay to my left, dark, except for moonlight through the windows. A silhouette sat motionless on the sofa, hands resting on his knees, posture relaxed. I reached around the corner and flipped the light switch. The man on my couch didn't flinch. He was in his mid-40s, compact and muscular, dressed in a black leather jacket and dark jeans. His hair was slicked back, graying at the temples. He raised both hands slowly, palms open. "Easy, detective," he said, his voice carrying a faint Brooklyn accent. "I'm not here to hurt you. This is a professional courtesy." I kept the revolver trained on his chest. "Who are you?" "I'm Vincent Russo. People call me Vinny." He tilted his head toward the coffee table. "Mind if I lower my hands? My shoulders aren't what they used to be." "I keep them where they are." He nodded, unbothered. "Fair enough. You want to know why I'm sitting in your living room at 2:30 in the morning. So here's the short version. Your son owes my employers $300,000. The number hit me like a punch. What? Gambling debts, poker mostly, some sports betting. Julian's been playing at a private club in Portland for the past 18 months. He's good, I'll give him that, but not good enough. By June, he was in the hole for $250. By August, $300 even. I lowered the revolver an inch, my mind racing. Julian, gambling, $300,000. What does that have to do with me? Vinny's expression didn't change. Your son offered collateral, a life insurance policy. $500,000, beneficiary Julian Castellano. The policy pays out when you pass. Julian told my employers you were in poor health, that it wouldn't be long. They agreed to extend his deadline. The room tilted. I gripped the door frame with my free hand. You're telling me Julian used my life insurance to cover his debts? So that's exactly what I'm telling you. And when you didn't cooperate by dying on schedule, Julian decided to help things along. The vodka, the fake heart medication, the forged will. Vinny shrugged. It's not my style for what it's worth. Too messy. But desperate men do desperate things. I stared at him, trying to process the words. My son, my own son, had bet on my death. Why are you here? I asked finally. Because I'm done with your son's mess. Vinny lowered his hands, slowly resting them on his knees. I don't touch cops. Never have, never will. That's an old rule, and I don't break old rules. When I found out you were Ridgeview PD, I told my employers I was out. They weren't happy, but they know better than to push. He reached into his jacket pocket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a business card, setting it on the coffee table. You're going to need proof. Names, dates, transactions. I can't testify in court, but I can point you in the right direction. Julian signed documents. He made calls. It's all there if you know where to look. Why would you help me? Vinny stood his movements unhurried and gestured toward the front door. Because Julian's plan put me in a bad position. I don't like bad positions. And because you remind me of my old man. Retired cop, heart condition, too stubborn to quit. He deserved better than what he got. So do you. He walked toward the hallway, pausing at the threshold. One more thing. You're probably wondering why your fancy alarm didn't go off. I glanced at the motion sensor above the door. It's green LED dark. I cut the external power line before I came in, Vinny said. Took about 30 seconds with wire cutters. Then I used a signal jammer, $200 on eBay. Your $50 system's a toy detective. If you want real security, call a professional. He moved toward the kitchen and the rear window that faced the woods. I followed, keeping the revolver at my side. At the window, he paused, pointing to the glass. Glass cutter, he explained. Remove the pane, slip the latch, put it back when I left. You wouldn't have noticed unless you were looking for it. He opened the window, one leg already over the sill. Good luck with your son, Mr. Dalton. You're going to need it. Then he was gone, swallowed by the shadows between the trees. I locked the window, checked every door twice, and poured myself a whiskey I didn't drink. At 3:15, I called Frank Miller and left a voicemail summarizing Vinny's visit. At 4, I sat at the kitchen table and added another entry to my journal, my handwriting shaky from adrenaline and exhaustion. October 18th, 2024, 4 a.m. Vincent Russo, connected to organized crime, broke into my house tonight. He explained that Julian owes $300,000 in gambling debts and used my $500,000 life insurance policy as collateral. Julian's motive is now clear. He needs me gone to collect the insurance and pay his debts. I closed the notebook and watched the sky turn from black to gray. At 6:30, Frank called back, his voice tight with controlled fury. By 7, he was at my door with 2 uniformed officers and a forensic kit. By noon, we had a warrant. 2 days later, on the 20th of October, I was sitting in my study reviewing bank statements Frank had subpoenaed when my phone buzzed. A video call. Emma's name appeared on the screen, and I felt my chest tighten. But this time it was relief, not pain. I answered, and my granddaughter's face filled the screen, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, her blue eyes bright. Grandpa, you answered. Her face filled the screen, bright and unguarded, the way only a 10-year-old's can be. Blonde hair pulled back in a high ponytail, a gap where her left front tooth used to be freckles scattered across her nose. Emma, my granddaughter, the one pure thing left in this mess. Grandpa, she said again, her grin widening. I thought you weren't going to pick up. I forced a smile, settling back into my desk chair. I always pick up for you, sweetheart. How's school? Boring. She rolled her eyes. Mrs. Henderson makes us do multiplication tables every single day. I already know them. Multiplication's important, I said. You'll need it when you're older. That's what Mom says. Emma leaned closer to the camera, lowering her voice to a whisper. But I think she just doesn't want to help me with homework. I chuckled, the sound hollow in my chest. Where is your mom? It's upstairs. She's on the phone with somebody. She's been on the phone a lot lately. Emma tilted her head. Grandpa, when are you coming to visit? You promised you'd take me to the zoo before it gets too cold. The zoo. I'd promised her that back in July before everything started unraveling. Soon, I said, hating the lie. I've been a little busy, but I'll come see you soon. You always say that. She pouted, then brightened. Dad says we're going to be rich soon. Maybe we can go to the big zoo in Seattle instead, the one with the pandas. The words hit me like ice water. I kept my expression neutral. Your dad said that, yeah, he's been really happy lately. He keeps saying things are going to get better, that we won't have to worry about money anymore. Emma twirled a strand of hair around her finger. He talks to somebody named Vinny a lot, like every day. Is Vinny your friend? My throat closed. I swallowed hard. No, sweetheart. Vinny's not my friend. Why do you ask? Because Dad mentions you when he talks to Vinny. He locks himself in his office and talks really quiet, but I heard him say your name once. And something about insurance. She wrinkled her nose. What's insurance? I closed my eyes for a breath, trying to steady the roar in my ears. Insurance it's something grown-ups have to make sure their families are taken care of. It's complicated. Oh, she shrugged, already losing interest. Dad says a lot of complicated stuff lately. Mom gets mad at him sometimes. I heard them fighting last week. About what? Emma hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. When she turned back, her voice was quieter. I don't know. But Mom was crying. She said something about how she didn't sign up for this, and Dad said she needed to trust him, that everything would work out. I wanted to reach through the screen and pull her out of that house, away from Julian. But all I could do was sit 300 miles away and listen. Emma, I said gently, has your dad been acting strange, different than usual? She thought for a moment, chewing her bottom lip. Kind of. He's gone a lot. And when he's home, he's always on his phone or in his office. He used to play board games with me on Saturdays, but he hasn't done that in forever. Her eyes brightened. But he bought me a new iPad last month. He said it was an early birthday present. An early birthday present. Paid for with borrowed money, or money he expected to collect once I was gone. That's nice of him, I managed. Yeah, Emma leaned back. Grandpa, can I tell you a secret? Of course. And Dad told me not to talk to you about the Vinny stuff. He said it was private, and I shouldn't mention it if you called. She bit her lip, looking guilty. But I miss you. And I don't think secrets are good. Mom says secrets make people sick. Your mother is right, I wanted to say. Secrets rot from the inside out. Instead, I said, I miss you too, sweetheart. And you can always talk to me about anything, okay? No matter what your dad says. She nodded, her smile returning. Okay. We talked for another few minutes. About her friends at school, about the book she was reading, about the stray cat in their backyard. I let her chatter fill the silence. When Sarah called her name from upstairs, Emma waved at the camera. I have to go. Love you, Grandpa. Love you too, Emma. The screen went dark. I sat motionless for a long time, staring at the blank tablet. Dad says we're going to be rich soon. He talks to somebody named Vinny a lot. He mentions you. Julian hadn't just planned my death. He'd talked about it openly enough that a 10-year-old had picked up fragments. He'd locked himself in his office and made calls to Vinny Russo. while his daughter played in the next room negotiating the terms of his father's life insurance. I opened my journal and began to write. October 20th, 2024, 5 o'clock p.m. Emma called today. She mentioned that Julian has been telling her we're going to be rich soon, and that he frequently speaks with someone named Vinny. She overheard him mention my name and the word insurance. Julian has instructed Emma not to discuss this with me. Sarah has been arguing with Julian. Emma heard her mother crying last week. My son is using his own daughter as cover while he plans my elimination. I closed the notebook and called Frank Miller. He answered on the second ring. Archer, what is it? So I just talked to Emma. Julian's been on the phone with Vinny Russo regularly. He's told Emma they're going to be rich soon, and she overheard him mention my name and life insurance. A pause. Out of the mouths of babes, Frank, we need to talk to Sarah. Alone. Away from Julian. Agreed. Can you set it up? I'll try. The next afternoon, I sat in a corner booth at the Brew Haven, a coffee shop 20 miles outside Ridgeview. The place smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon, and rain drummed against the windows. At 3 o'clock, the door opened and Sara Castellano stepped inside, shaking water from her coat, her dark hair plastered to her forehead. She saw me and froze. Then slowly she crossed the room and slid into the seat opposite mine. She looked smaller than I remembered, hunched in the booth seat, with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug she hadn't touched. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hair, usually swept up in a neat bun, hung loose around her shoulders, damp from the rain. Sarah had always carried herself with a kind of careful composure, the posture of a woman who'd learned early how to keep her guard up. Today, that composure was gone. "Thank you for coming," I said quietly. She nodded, her gaze fixed on the table between us. I almost didn't. I know. A waitress drifted past, refilling water glasses, and we both waited until she was out of earshot. The cafe hummed with low conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine, but our corner felt isolated, separate from the rest of the world. Sarah. I began keeping my voice gentle. Emma called me 2 days ago. She told me some things. Things I don't think she understood. Sarah's jaw tightened. What did she say? How that Julian's been telling her you're all going to be rich soon. That he talks to someone named Vinny regularly. That she overheard him mention my name and life insurance. Her eyes closed. When she opened them again, they were wet. I told him to stop. I told him Emma was too young to keep secrets, that she'd say something eventually. He wouldn't listen. How long have you known? She drew a shaky breath. About the debt, 6 months. I found an email on his laptop in April. He'd left it open. Careless, or maybe he wanted me to see it. A lawyer representing the Benedetti family. They were discussing payment terms for $300,000. She paused, wrapping her arms around herself. I confronted Julian. He told me it was under control, that he had a plan, that I needed to trust him. Good, and you believed him? I wanted to. Her voice broke on the last word. He's my husband, Emma's father. I wanted to believe he wasn't stupid enough to borrow money from the mob. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. Sarah, I need you to be very clear with me. Did you know about the vodka, about the fake heart medication? Her head snapped up, eyes wide. What? Someone sent me a bottle of vodka laced with aconitine, a poison. My lawyer drank it and nearly died. Someone also swapped my nitroglycerin pills with a different drug. If I'd taken one during a heart attack, I would have died within minutes. The color drained from her face. No, I didn't know. I swear to God, Archer, I didn't know. Her hands shook so badly she had to set the mug down. Julian told me he was working on refinancing. He said he had a business opportunity, that he just needed a few more months. He never said anything about... She stopped, pressing a hand to her mouth. I watched her carefully, searching for any sign of deception. I'd spent 2 decades reading people, learning to spot the micro-expressions that betrayed a lie. Sarah's shock looked genuine. "When did Vinny start following you?" I asked. "In July. I saw him outside Emma's school twice in 1 week, then outside our apartment. I asked Julian about it, and he admitted Vinny worked for the people he owed money to. He said they were just keeping tabs, making sure we didn't run." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Julian told me if I said anything to anyone, to you, to the police, to anyone, he'd leave. He said he'd disappear and we'd be stuck with the debt, that the Benedettis would come after me and Emma to collect. The bastard had used his own wife and daughter as hostages. Sarah, I need you to testify. I need you to tell a prosecutor everything you just told me. The emails, Vinny Julian's threats. Without your testimony, we don't have enough to prove Julian planned this." She stared at me, her expression torn between fear and something that looked like relief. "If I testify what happens to me, I knew about the debt. I didn't report it. Doesn't that make me an accessory number?" I kept my voice firm, steady. "You were coerced. Julian threatened to abandon you and Emma. That's duress. A good prosecutor will understand that. But what if they don't? Then we'll make them understand." I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. "I'm going to call Detective Frank Miller. He's been working this case with me. He can arrange a meeting with the county prosecutor's office. We'll negotiate immunity for you, full immunity in exchange for your cooperation. You testify, and you walk away clean." Her breath hitched. "And Emma will be safe. That's the priority. Julian won't be able to threaten either of you once he's in custody." Sarah stared at the phone for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay. Do it." I dialed Frank's number. He picked up on the second ring. "Archer, tell me you've got good news." "Ma, I'm at Maple Street Cafe with Sarah Castellano. She's willing to testify. She knew about the debt and Vinny, but she didn't know about the vodka or the medication. Julian threatened to leave her and Emma if she talked. We need an immunity deal." A pause. "Put her on speaker." I tapped the button. "You're on, Frank." "Mrs. Castellano, this is Detective Frank Miller. Have you been in contact with your husband since agreeing to meet Mr. Dalton today?" Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "No. He thinks I'm visiting my sister in Eugene." "Good. Keep it that way. I'm going to call the county prosecutor's office right now. Can you stay where you are for the next hour?" "Yes." "All right, sit tight. I'll have an answer for you soon." The line went dead. Sarah exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging. "What if Julian finds out? He won't," I said, though I couldn't be certain. "Frank's discreet, and once you're under witness protection, Julian won't be able to touch you." She nodded, but the fear didn't leave her eyes. 2 days later, on the morning of October 23rd, Frank and I stood outside the offices of Whitmore and Associates. The building looked the same as it had 3 weeks ago. Red brick brass nameplate, the scent of old paper, and lemon polish drifting through the open door. But David Whitmore was no longer inside. He was home recovering, and his son Thomas had taken over the practice. Thomas Whitmore Jr. met us in the reception area, a man in his early 40s with his father's sharp eyes and his mother's precise demeanor. He shook our hands and gestured toward the conference room. "Gentlemen, my father told me you'd be coming." The conference room smelled like leather and old paper, the kind of scent that clings to law offices. Thomas Whitmore, Jr. gestured for us to sit at the long mahogany table, then crossed to a wall safe hidden behind a framed print. He spun the dial, pulled the door open, and withdrew a manila folder embossed with my name. My father kept the original here," Thomas said, setting the folder in front of me. "He never trusted digital storage for estate documents." I opened the folder. Inside lay a will dated March 15th, 2020, signed in my own handwriting and witnessed by David Whitmore and his secretary. The language was straightforward: "Upon my death, My estate would be divided equally between Julian Castellano and Emma Castellano, with a trust established for Emma until she turned 25. This is the real one, I said quietly. Thomas nodded. That's the version my father filed with the state. But 3 weeks ago, when you brought him that vodka, he pulled up the case file and found something else. He opened his laptop and clicked a file. A PDF appeared. Another will dated August 15th, 2024, bearing a digital signature that looked like mine. This version left 100% of my estate to Julian Castellano. No mention of Emma. Frank leaned forward, his jaw tight. How did this get into your system? That's what we hired Catherine Walsh to find out. Catherine Walsh arrived 10 minutes later, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and the demeanor of someone who spent her days dissecting code. She set a tablet on the table and pulled up a slideshow. Good gentlemen, she began, your son executed a 3-layer attack on Whitmore and Associates system. Let me walk you through them. She tapped the screen. The first slide showed a server log, rows of data stamped with dates and IP addresses. Layer 1, cyber intrusion. On August 15th at 2:34 a.m., someone accessed the firm's cloud server using credentials belonging to a former paralegal. The access originated from IP address 198.51.100.42, which traces to Unit 407 at the Laurelhurst Towers in Portland. My breath caught. Julian's apartment. The intruder navigated directly to your case file, deleted the original will dated March 2020, and uploaded a forged PDF dated August 2024. Total time in the system under 2 minutes. Frank made a note. Clean. Professional. Catherine nodded. Very. But they made one mistake. Server logs capture metadata. We traced the IP through 3 proxy layers back to the Laurelhurst address. Ridgeview PD confirmed the lease is under Julian Castellano's name. She swiped to the next slide, a grainy photograph of a hallway, time-stamped September 12th, 2024, 11:55 p.m. Layer 2, physical intrusion. This is footage from a backup security camera. At 11:55 p.m. on September 12th, a man approximately 5 feet 10 inches tall entered the office. He wore a hoodie and gloves, but his build matches a male in his mid to late 30s. She zoomed in. The figure moved with purpose, heading straight for David Whitmore's office. He was inside for 8 minutes. The next morning, Mary Baker found a printed copy of the forged August will in the pending files tray on her desk. The paper stock matched the firm's letterhead. Mary assumed Mr. Whitmore had printed it himself and filed it accordingly. Thomas interjected. My father never printed that will. He didn't even know it existed until you brought him the vodka, and he cross-checked the files. Catherine swiped again. The third slide showed an email header, lines of code across the screen. Layer 3, social engineering. On October 8th at 9:20 a.m., Mr. Whitmore received an email from archer.dalton.official@gmail.com. The subject line read, Updated will, please review. The body was brief, asking him to update his records and signed with your name. She looked at me. You don't use Gmail, do you, Mr. Dalton? No. I've had the same Yahoo account for 15 years. So it's exactly. The email was spoofed. When we examined the headers, the originating IP was once again 198.51.100.42. Julian's apartment. Frank exhaled slowly. 3 layers. Cyber, physical, social. Correct, Catherine said. Each layer reinforced the others. If the digital forgery was discovered, the printed copy provided corroboration. If someone questioned the printed copy, the email created a false paper trail. This wasn't opportunistic, detective. This was premeditated, methodical, and executed over a 2-month period. I stared at the dates on the screen. August 15th, September 12th, October 8th. Julian had started planning this in mid-August, weeks before my birthday, weeks before he sent the poisoned vodka. He'd built redundancies, anticipated obstacles, covered every angle. My son had studied how to erase me. Frank stood gathering the forensic reports. Thomas, I need certified copies of everything. The original will, the server logs, the security footage, the email headers. I'll forward them to the prosecutor's office today. Thomas nodded. I'll have them ready within the hour. Frank turned to me. Archer, we've got him. The IP traced the physical evidence, Sarah's testimony, Vinny's information. It's enough for an arrest warrant. I'll call Judge Holloway this afternoon. I couldn't speak. I could only nod. The following night, I sat alone in my study, the house dark except for the lamp on my desk. Rain tapped against the windows. I opened my journal to a blank page and began to write. October 24th, 2024, 11 p.m. Today, I learned the full extent of Julian's plan. He hacked the law firm's server on August 15th, deleted my real will, and uploaded a forgery. On September 12th, he broke into the office and planted a printed copy. On October 8th, he sent a fake email to David posing as me. 3 layers. 3 separate crimes, all designed to ensure that when I died, when he succeeded in poisoning me, there would be no question about who inherited my estate. Frank says we have enough for an arrest warrant. Tomorrow or the day after, Julian will be taken into custody. I should feel relief. Instead, I feel hollow. I closed the notebook and stared at the rain. The rain had softened to a whisper against the windows, and the house felt too quiet. I sat at the kitchen table under the yellow glow of the overhead lamp, my journal open in front of me, the pen heavy in my hand. Outside, the maples swayed their branches, scraping the siding. I turned to a blank page and began to write. October 24th, 2024, 11:10 p.m. Tomorrow morning, Frank will execute an arrest warrant for Julian Castellano. Before that happens, I need to set down everything that led us here. Not for the court, Frank and Catherine have compiled that evidence, but for myself. So I can understand how my son became someone I no longer recognize. The timeline. October 12th. I received a bottle of vodka, Blackthorn Crystal Reserve 1952, valued at $3,800 via FedEx from Julian. A handwritten birthday card was enclosed. I did not drink it. Instead, I gave it to David Whitmore during a meeting to discuss my will. October 12th, 9:47 p.m. Margaret Whitmore called to report that David had collapsed with severe cardiac arrhythmia after drinking approximately 50 milliliters of the vodka. He was hospitalized. I became the primary suspect. October 14th. Toxicology confirmed the vodka contained aconitine, a lethal poison. David survived only because he drank a small amount. That same day, Dr. Brennan discovered my heart medication had been swapped with amlodipine, a calcium channel blocker. If I had taken it during an angina attack, I would have died. October 15th. Julian called me. I recorded the conversation. He asked if I had drunk the vodka, then asked which friend had received it. His tone revealed he knew David had consumed it. October 16th. I discovered a broken thread trap and a rotated dummy camera indicating an intruder had bypassed my alarm overnight. Forensic analysis matched Julian's handwriting. I was cleared as a suspect. IT forensics revealed Julian had hacked Whitmore and Associates' server in August to alter my will. October 17th. I received an unmarked envelope containing a photograph of my house, time-stamped 11:47 p.m. on October 16th. That morning, I suffered a severe angina attack and nearly took the fake medication. Dr. Brennan arrived with verified nitroglycerin and saved my life. October 18th, 2:34 a.m. Vincent Russo, an associate of the Benedetti crime family, broke into my home. He informed me that Julian owed $300,000 in gambling debts and had used my $500,000 life insurance policy as collateral. Julian had planned my death to collect the payout. October 20th. My granddaughter Emma called. She disclosed that Julian had told her we're going to be rich soon, and that he frequently spoke with someone named Vinny. She mentioned overhearing Julian discuss my name and the word insurance. October 21st. I met with Sarah Castellano. She confirmed that Julian owed gambling debts and that Vinny had been following their family for 6 months. She stated that Julian had threatened to abandon her and Emma if she spoke to anyone. She agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. October 23rd, Thomas Whitmore Jr. and Catherine Walsh presented evidence of Julian's 3-layer attack. Cyber intrusion, August 15th. Julian accessed the firm's server from his Portland apartment, deleted my original will, and uploaded a forged version. Physical intrusion, September 12th, Julian entered the office, printed the forged will, and planted it. Email spoofing, October 8th, Julian sent a fake email impersonating me, instructing David to update my will. Frank confirmed we have sufficient evidence for an arrest warrant. I set the pen down and flexed my fingers. My handwriting had grown unsteady toward the end, the letters slanting and compressed. I read the entry twice, then closed the journal. The facts were there. The timeline was clear. But facts alone couldn't explain the hollow ache that had settled behind my ribs. I stood and crossed to the cabinet beside the refrigerator, where Kate used to keep photo albums. My fingers found the spine of the oldest album. I pulled it out and flipped through until I found the photograph I was looking for. Julian at 8 years old, standing beside a creek with a fishing rod in his hands. His hair stuck up in all directions, still damp from the water, and his grin was gap-toothed and wide. I stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder, both of us holding up a trout we'd caught together. Kate had taken the photo on a Saturday morning in June, back when weekends meant pancakes and fishing trips and bedtime stories. Back when my son had been a boy who laughed at my jokes and asked 100 questions. I carried the photograph to the table and sat down again, setting it beside the journal. For 10 minutes, I stared at that image at the child Julian had been, trying to reconcile him with the man who had sent poisoned vodka and hacked legal documents and wagered his father's life to pay off gambling debts. I couldn't. Finally, I picked up the photograph and held it close as if Kate might somehow see it too. "I'm sorry I couldn't save him," I whispered to her memory, to the woman who had loved Julian unconditionally. "But I have to stop him. If I don't, Emma won't be safe. No one will." The photograph offered no answer. I set it down gently face up and reached for my phone. Frank answered on the first ring. "Archer." "Not tomorrow morning," I said. "Let's finish this." A pause. "You sure?" "I'm sure." "All right. SWAT team assembles at 0500. We move at 0630. You want to be there?" I closed my eyes. "Yes. I'll pick you up at 0600. "Thank you, Frank. Get some sleep, Archer." I hung up and sat in the stillness, listening to the rain. At 6:47 the next morning, I sat in the passenger seat of Frank's unmarked sedan, parked 50 meters from the Laurelhurst Towers in Portland. Dawn had broken gray and cold, the city wrapped in fog. Ahead of us, 2 black SWAT vans idled at the curb, their engines rumbling low. Officers in tactical gear moved with silent efficiency, checking radios, adjusting vests, loading breaching tools. Frank glanced at me. "Last chance to wait at the station." I shook my head. "I need to see it." He nodded and keyed his radio. "All units, this is Miller. Proceed on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Execute." The van's doors flew open. "All right, we're at the breaking point." Before I reveal what happened when they came for Julian, the moment I heard his voice confessing everything, "I need to know you're still here. Drop the number 13 in the comments right now. Let me feel your presence." And a quick reminder, what follows blends experience with creative storytelling for emotional depth. If you'd rather not continue, feel free to pause here and choose content that resonates better with you. But if you're ready, let's go back to that cold morning in Portland. Through the windshield, I watched the SWAT officers move like shadows in the gray morning fog, their boots silent on wet pavement, rifles held low. On the Laurelhurst Towers rose ahead a glass and steel monument to new money, its upper floors still dark. Somewhere on the fourth floor in Unit 407, my son was waking up, unaware that his world was about to collapse. Frank's voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't be here, Archer. I didn't take my eyes off the building." "I know, but you deserve to see this." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Frank had bent the rules to let me ride along. Protocol said I should be waiting at the station, but he knew I needed to witness this. At 6:49, his radio crackled. "Breacher in position. Ready on your mark, detective." Frank keyed the mic. "All units hold. Confirm exits secured. South exit clear. North exit clear. Parking garage secured." Frank exhaled slowly. "Execute on 3, 1, 2, 3, go." The lead officer swung the battering ram. The door to Unit 407 exploded inward with a crack like thunder, and the team poured through, voices overlapping in sharp commands. "Police search warrant. Hands where we can see them." I couldn't hear Julian's response from 50 meters away, but I didn't need to. Through the doorway, I saw officers spread through the apartment, flashlights cutting the darkness. And then two of them emerged with a figure between them. Tall, lean, dressed in a white t-shirt and boxer's, hands cuffed behind his back. Julian. Even from this distance, I recognized the set of his shoulders, the tilt of his head. He didn't struggle, didn't shout. He walked calmly between the officers. His expression unreadable, as if being arrested at dawn was a minor inconvenience. Behind him, Sarah appeared in the doorway, clutching Emma against her chest. Emma's face was buried in her mother's shoulder, her small body shaking with sobs. Sarah's eyes were wide and red. "Addie!" Emma's scream cut through the fog, high and desperate, and my chest cracked open. Frank put a hand on my arm. "Stay in the car, Archer." I stayed. At 7:15, as officers were loading Julian into a transport van, a black sedan pulled up. The driver's door opened, and Vincent Russo stepped out, dressed in a dark suit, his face impassive. He walked directly to Frank and handed him a small object wrapped in a plastic evidence bag. A USB drive. Frank held it up to the light. "This, the recording. October 10th. Julian and my former employers. Everything you need." Vinny's Brooklyn accent was flat, businesslike. "I've already spoken with the prosecutor's office. Full cooperation in exchange for immunity. My lawyer has the paperwork." "And when did you record this?" 2 weeks before the vodka was delivered. Julian called to confirm the timeline. I recorded it as insurance. Didn't want to end up holding the bag if things went sideways. Vinny glanced at the transport van. "Looks like they did." Frank pocketed the drive. "You'll need to testify." "I know. My lawyer will coordinate." Vinny turned to leave, then paused and looked at me through the windshield. For a moment, our eyes met. He nodded once, not an apology, but an acknowledgement, and walked back to his car. Frank plugged the USB into a tablet and handed me an earbud. "You sure you want to hear this?" I took the earbud. "Yes." He pressed play. Static hissed. Then Julian's voice came through, clear and cold. "The old man won't drink it, but his lawyer will. Once the medication finishes him off, I'll have the insurance payout and the estate. 500,000 plus whatever's left after probate. Enough to clear the debt, and then some." A second voice, older and rougher. "You better not screw this up, kid. 300 grand is a steep price for forgiveness. You don't deliver, we collect another way. And your wife and kid make convenient collateral." Julian's reply was immediate, emotionless. "I won't screw it up. The plan's airtight. No one suspects a birthday gift from a son to his father." "Good. Call me when it's done." The line went dead. I pulled the earbud out my hands, trembling. Frank took the tablet without a word. Through the transport van's window, I could see Julian's profile, still calm, still unreadable. Then, as if sensing my gaze, he turned his head and looked directly at me. He smiled. Not a nervous smile, but a cold, deliberate smile that said, "I know exactly what I did and I'd do it again." His jaw tightened briefly, a flicker of something beneath the mask. And then it was gone. For 5 seconds, we stared at each other across 50 meters of wet pavement, father and son, and I saw nothing in his eyes I recognized. Then the van pulled away. Emma broke free from Sarah and ran toward the street, her small legs pumping, her voice breaking. "Daddy, Daddy, don't leave me." I was out of the car before I realized I'd moved, crossing the distance in long strides, catching her before she reached the curb. She collapsed against me, her sobs wrenching and raw, and I held her the way I used to hold Julian when he was small. "And it's okay, sweetheart," I whispered, though it wasn't, though nothing about this was okay. "It's okay. I've got you." Sarah reached us a moment later, her face pale and hollow. "Archer, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't." "I know," I said quietly. "Take her home. Frank will call you later about the trial." She nodded, taking Emma's hand, and led her back toward the building. At 10 o'clock that morning, I sat in a windowless interrogation room at Portland Police Headquarters, staring at the two-way mirror on the far wall. Frank stood beside me, arms crossed. The door opened. 2 officers led Julian inside, still cuffed, still calm. They seated him across the table from me and stepped back, flanking the door. Julian looked at me and smiled again. "Hello, Dad." The interrogation room was small and windowless, lit by a single fluorescent panel that hummed like a dying wasp. A metal table bolted to the floor separated us, its surface scarred with initials and crude drawings left by 1,000 suspects before my son. Julian sat across from me, his hands cuffed in front of him, resting on the table. His white t-shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, but his posture was relaxed, almost casual, as if this were a coffee shop conversation rather than the prelude to a murder trial. Frank stood in the corner with a uniformed officer, arms crossed, watching us both. The air smelled like old coffee and industrial cleaner. Julian tilted his head, studying me the way you'd study a chessboard, calculating his next move. "So, what now, Dad? You going to tell me how disappointed you are?" I didn't answer immediately. I couldn't. My throat felt like it was packed with gravel, and my hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the table to keep them still. Frank stepped forward. "Archer, you don't have to do this. We have everything we need for the case. You can wait outside." I shook my head. "I need to talk to him." Frank glanced at Julian. "You willing to speak with your father, just the two of you?" Julian's eyes flicked between us, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Sure. Why not last chance for a heart-to-heart, right?" Frank's jaw tightened, but he nodded. He gestured to the officer, and the two of them stepped out of the room, the door clicking shut behind them. I knew Frank would be standing behind the one-way mirror on the far wall, watching, listening, recording every word. But for the next 10 minutes, it would just be me and Julian, alone. "Why?" I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why, Julian? I gave you everything." He laughed, short, bitter, empty. "Everything you gave me: lectures, Dad. Rules. Curfews. Do the right thing, Julian. Be honest, Julian. Work hard, Julian. I know. You gave me a childhood full of disappointments disguised as lessons. I gave you a home, an education. I was there for every birthday, every baseball game, every baseball game where you showed up late because you were chasing some case that mattered more than I did." His tone was flat, rehearsed, as if he'd been practicing this speech for years. "Mom died because you were too busy playing the hero detective to notice she was sick." The words hit me like a fist. "Your mother had cancer, Julian. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. By the time we found it, there was nothing anyone could do. I sat by her bed every single day for 8 months. I held her hand when and you still couldn't save her. He leaned forward, his cuffed hands sliding across the table. You couldn't save her, and you couldn't save me. So yeah, Dad, forgive me if I don't see you as some kind of saint. I stared at him, trying to find the boy I used to know in the stranger sitting across from me. This isn't about your mother. This is about you owing $300,000 to a crime family and deciding the easiest way out was to poison your own father. Not poison, insurance. Julian shrugged, the gesture so casual it made my stomach turn. The Benedettis were going to finish me. You think I wanted to do this? You were just convenient. The policy was already in place. You're old, you have a heart condition. No one would have questioned it if you'd had another attack and didn't wake up. Convenient. I repeated the word slowly, tasting its ugliness. That's what I am to you, convenient. Yeah, he didn't blink. That's what you are. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the pain radiating from my chest. Not angina this time. Just grief. What about Emma? I asked, finally opening my eyes. What about your daughter? She's 10 years old, Julian. She watched you get arrested this morning. She screamed for you. For the first time, Julian's mask slipped. His eyes flicked away from mine just for a second, and he blinked, once quick and involuntary, as if the question had caught him off guard. Then the coldness returned. She'll be fine, he said, his voice too steady, too controlled. Kids are resilient. Sarah will remarry eventually. Emma won't even remember me in a few years. You don't believe that? I have to. He looked down at his cuffed hands, turning them over, as if noticing them for the first time. Because if I don't, then I have to admit I destroyed my daughter's life along with yours, and I'm not ready to do that yet. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady, and placed both hands flat on the table. I loved you, Julian. I still do. But I can't protect you from this. I won't. He didn't look up. I know. You tried to kill me. You poisoned David. You forged my will, hacked a law firm, swapped my medication. You put your wife and daughter in danger. You don't get to walk away from this. I'm not asking to. His voice was quiet now, drained of the bravado he'd worn like armor. I knew what I was doing, Dad. I knew it would end like this. I thought I'd have more time. I thought the plan was better than it was. I turned toward the door, then stopped. Do you regret it? Silence. Do you regret trying to end my life so you could pay off your debts? Julian lifted his head, and for a moment I saw something raw and unguarded in his eyes. Not remorse exactly, but exhaustion. The exhaustion of a man who'd spent years running from consequences and had finally been caught. No, he said softly. I don't. I needed the money. You were in the way. That's all it was. I nodded, the last fragile thread of hope snapping inside me. Then we're done here. I walked to the door and knocked twice. Frank opened it immediately, his expression unreadable. Take him back to holding, I said without looking at Julian again. We're finished. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard Julian's voice one last time, faint and empty. Goodbye, Dad. I didn't turn around. 6 weeks later, on the morning of December 8th, I stood outside courtroom 3B at the Ridgeview County Courthouse, adjusting the knot of my tie with hands that still shook when I thought too hard about what was coming. The hallway smelled like floor polish and old wood, and the winter light slanting through the tall windows made everything look washed out and gray. Frank appeared beside me holding 2 paper cups of coffee. He handed me one without a word. You ready? He asked. I took a sip, the coffee bitter and scalding. No. Good. That means you're still human. The courtroom doors opened and a bailiff gestured for us to enter. The trial was about to begin. Courtroom 3B smelled like polished wood and old anxiety, the kind of scent that seeps into walls after decades of verdicts. I sat in the third row behind the prosecution table, my hands folded to keep them from shaking. Ahead of me, Julian sat beside his attorney, Rebecca Hayes, dressed in a gray suit that made him look almost innocent. His hair was neatly combed, his posture straight, his expression blank. He didn't look at me. Judge Patricia Holloway, a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, sat elevated at the bench. To her right, 12 jurors filled the jury box, their faces carefully neutral. The bailiff stepped forward. "All rise. The State of Oregon versus Julian Castellano." We rose. The judge gestured for us to sit. "Mr. Castellano," she said, "you are charged with attempted murder in the first-degree fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. How do you plead?" Julian stood shoulders square. "Not guilty, Your Honor." His voice was steady, confident. I felt something twist in my chest. Very well." Judge Holloway nodded to the prosecution table. "Mr. Morrison, your opening statement." James Morrison rose, a man in his early 40s with controlled energy. He buttoned his suit jacket and faced the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, over the next few days, you will hear a story about greed, betrayal, and cold calculation. Julian Castellano planned to end his father's life for money, not in passion, not in self-defense, but methodically over 2 months, using poison-forged documents and stolen identity." He paced slowly. "The evidence will show that Mr. Castellano sent his father a bottle of vodka laced with aconitine, a lethal toxin. When his father refused to drink it, the vodka was given to David Whitmore, the family's lawyer. Mr. Whitmore consumed approximately 50 milliliters and nearly died." Morrison paused. "You will also hear that Mr. Castellano swapped his father's heart medication with a dangerous substitute, hacked a law firm's system to forge a will, leaving him the entire estate, and used a $500,000 life insurance policy as collateral for gambling debts." He turned to face Julian. "This was not a mistake. This was attempted murder, premeditated and deliberate." Judge Holloway nodded to the defense. Ms. Hayes, Rebecca Hayes, stood approaching the jury box with calm deliberation. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client made mistakes. Serious mistakes. But mistakes born of fear, not malice. Julian Castellano owed $300,000 to a criminal organization that threatened his life and the lives of his wife and daughter. He was desperate. He panicked." She gestured toward Julian. "But the prosecution wants you to believe Julian is a cold-blooded killer. That's not true. Julian was a man drowning in debt, manipulated by criminals trying to protect his family the only way he knew how." She sat down. The jurors exchanged garters. The prosecution called its first witness. "Dr. Michael Brennan, please take the stand." Dr. Brennan testified about David Whitmore's aconitine poisoning and the swapped medication in my prescription. Morrison presented the evidence bags containing both. David Whitmore was next. When Morrison asked him to describe October 12th, David's voice was steady but quiet. "Archer brought me a bottle of vodka as a gift. I drank approximately 2 ounces. Within an hour, I was experiencing severe chest pain. At the hospital, doctors told me I'd been poisoned." Catherine Walsh took the stand next, presenting server logs showing Julian's apartment as the source of the hacked will. Chaktatin. The digital will was uploaded from IP address 198.51.100.42 at 2:34 a.m. on August 15th. That address corresponds to Unit 407 at the Laurelhurst Towers, leased to Julian Castellano. At 2 o'clock, Morrison called my name. "The state calls Archer Dalton." I walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Morrison approached. "Mr. Dalton, did your son know about your heart condition?" Yes. He visited me in 2021. I showed him my prescriptions and the vodka bottle. Who sent it?" "Julian. It arrived via FedEx on my birthday. I didn't trust him, so I gave it to David Whitmore. David nearly died because of my instinct." I paused. At first, the police suspected me because I delivered the bottle, but the evidence proved Julian was the sender. Rebecca Hayes rose for cross-examination. Mr. Dalton, you and Julian have had a strained relationship for many years, haven't you? Yes. Is it possible someone else tampered with that bottle? No. The lab confirmed the seal was intact until David opened it. The handwriting matched Julian's. The FedEx tracking showed shipment from Portland sender listed as Julian Castellano, Hayes pressed. But you admit you didn't trust your son. Couldn't that bias affect your testimony? My testimony is based on evidence, not bias. She nodded. No further questions. At 5 o'clock, Judge Holloway rapped her gavel. Court is adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow. I stepped into the hallway, exhausted. Sarah Castellano stood near the elevator, her arms wrapped around herself. When she saw me, she nodded once. Tomorrow she would testify. The courtroom felt colder on the second day, as if the weight of what was coming had leached the warmth from the walls. I sat in the same third-row seat, watching Sarah Castellano walk to the witness stand. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, her face pale and drawn. When she raised her right hand to take the oath, her fingers trembled. Julian sat motionless at the defense table, staring straight ahead. He didn't look at her. James Morrison approached. Mrs. Castellano, did you know your husband planned to harm his father? Sarah's voice was barely audible. I knew about the debt. I knew Vinnie Russo had been following us for months. But I didn't know about the vodka or the medication until Detective Miller told me. She paused, her composure cracking. Julian threatened me. He said if I told anyone, he'd take Emma and disappear. I was terrified. Oh, did you have any evidence of your husband's intentions? Yes. Sarah pulled out a printed email. Julian wrote this to a lawyer representing the Benedetti family. It's dated October 3rd. It says, once the old man is gone, I'll transfer $200,000 immediately. Morrison held up the email for the jury. Once the old man is gone, meaning Archer Dalton. Yes. Rebecca Hayes rose for cross-examination. Mrs. Castellano, you're testifying in exchange for immunity, correct? Yes. So you have every reason to shift blame onto your husband to protect yourself. Sarah's eyes flashed. I'm testifying because my daughter deserves a mother who tells the truth. Julian put all of us in danger. I won't let him do it again. Hayes nodded. No further questions. At 10:30, Vincent Russo took the stand. He looked different in a suit and tie, almost respectable, but his Brooklyn accent reminded everyone of what he was. Mr. Russo, you were employed by the Benedetti crime family to monitor Archer Dalton, correct? Correct. Why? Julian Castellano owed $300,000. He told my employers he'd pay it off with a life insurance policy. $500,000 payable on his father's death. My job was to make sure the old man didn't run before Julian could collect. Did Julian ever express remorse for his plan? Vinnie's expression didn't change. No. He talked about it like it was a business transaction. When I told him I was pulling out because I don't touch cops, he laughed, said his father was too proud to see it coming. Morrison held up the USB drive. You provided a recording of Julian discussing the plan. Why? Not insurance. I knew if things went sideways, I'd need proof I wasn't calling the shots. Hayes declined to cross-examine. At 2 o'clock, Morrison stood for his closing argument. But ladies and gentlemen, Julian Castellano is guilty of attempted murder in the first degree. Not manslaughter, not a crime of passion. Premeditated, calculated, attempted murder. He gestured toward the evidence table. He sent poisoned vodka. He swapped life-saving medication. He hacked a law firm to forge a will. And when his father refused to drink the vodka and gave it to David Whitmore instead, Julian didn't stop. He didn't call. He didn't warn anyone. He let Mr. Whitmore nearly die, and he let his own father become the prime suspect. Morrison's voice hardened. That is not the behavior of a desperate man. That is cruelty. The evidence is overwhelming. The verdict must be guilty. Rebecca Hayes rose. Ladies and gentlemen, my client made terrible choices, but those choices were driven by fear, not malice. Julian owed $300,000 to a criminal organization that threatened to harm his wife and daughter. He panicked. She paused. But Julian never directly harmed anyone. David Whitmore drank the vodka of his own free will. Archer Dalton never took the fake medication. No one died. This is not attempted murder. At most, this is reckless endangerment. She sat. The courtroom was silent. Judge Holloway addressed the jury. You will now retire to deliberate. A unanimous verdict is required. The jury filed out. The clock read 4:03. I waited in the hallway with Frank Miller drinking bitter coffee and watching the winter sky darken. Frank didn't try to make conversation. He just stood beside me. At 8:15, the bailiff emerged. Jury's back. We filed into the courtroom. The jury took their seats. Judge Holloway looked at the foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find guilty? The word hung in the air, heavy and final. On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of identity theft, guilty. Not on the charge of conspiracy, guilty. Judge Holloway nodded. The defendant is found guilty on all counts. Sentencing is scheduled for December 30th. The defendant is remanded to custody. Julian stood slowly, his jaw tightening. He turned and looked at me. Not a garcher, but a deliberate 3-second stare, cold and empty. Then he turned away and let the officers lead him out. I didn't move. I couldn't. At 8:45, I stepped out of the courthouse into the cold Oregon night. Snow had begun to fall soft and silent. My breath misted in the air. Frank appeared beside me. You okay? I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. It's done. Sentencing's in 3 weeks. Judge will probably give him 20 to 25. You planning to be there? I shook my head. No, I've heard enough. Frank studied me, then clapped a hand on my shoulder. Go home, Archer. Get some rest. I watched him walk to his car, then headed toward my own. The snow was falling harder now, and for the first time in 2 months, I felt something close to peace. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Snow had been falling since morning, soft and relentless, blanketing the maples and the driveway in a silence that felt almost holy. I stood at the kitchen window, watching it accumulate white on white, erasing the tire tracks and footprints. Kate used to say the first snow made everything new again, that it gave you permission to start over. I didn't know if I believed that, but I wanted to. At 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found Emma standing on the porch in a red winter coat, her blonde hair dusted with snowflakes, her cheeks pink from the cold. She held a small backpack and looked up at me with eyes that were too hopeful, too trusting. Hi, Grandpa. I knelt down and pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the cold winter air. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just held her and tried not to let her feel me shaking. Come inside, sweetheart. It's freezing out here. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate with too many marshmallows. She didn't ask about Julian right away. She talked about school, about her friend Megan's birthday party, about the stray cat on their back porch. I let her talk, grateful for the normalcy. Finally, she set the mug down and looked at me. Grandpa, where's Dad? I'd been preparing for this question for 2 weeks, rehearsing answers that would be honest, but gentle. None felt adequate. Your dad made some mistakes, Emma, big ones, and because of those mistakes, he has to go away for a long time. How long? A very long time. Her brow furrowed. Did he hurt somebody? He tried to. He didn't succeed, but he tried. And the law says that when you try to hurt someone, there are consequences. She was quiet, staring into her mug. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading most. Do you still love him? My eyes burned. I reached across the table and took her small hand in mine. Yes, I still love him. But sometimes love isn't enough to fix what's broken. Sometimes people make choices that hurt the people who care about them most, and no amount of love can undo that. A tear slid down her cheek. I miss him. I know, sweetheart, I do too. We baked cookies that afternoon, using Kate's old recipe card with the faded handwriting. Emma stood on a stool beside me, measuring flour and cracking eggs with intense concentration. We didn't talk much. We just worked side by side and let the warmth of the oven and the smell of vanilla fill the silence. While the first batch cooled, Emma wandered into the living room and found the photo album on the coffee table. She carried it back to the kitchen and climbed onto the stool, flipping through the pages. Is this Dad? I looked over her shoulder. The photograph showed Julian at 8 years old, standing beside a creek with a fishing rod, his grin gap-toothed and wide. I stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder. That's him. We went fishing that day. He caught a trout almost as big as he was. Emma traced the image with one finger. He looks happy. He was. For a long time, he was very happy. What happened? I sat down beside her. He got lost, I think. Life got complicated, and he made choices that took him farther and farther away from the person he used to be. By the time he realized how far he'd gone, he didn't know how to come back. Emma was quiet. Then she said, Do you think he'll ever find his way back? I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so. But hope doesn't always mean things will turn out the way we want. She nodded, solemn and small, and closed the album. At 8 o'clock, Sarah arrived to pick her up. Emma hugged me tightly at the door, her arms wrapped around my waist. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, Emma. More than you'll ever know. Sarah met my eyes over Emma's head, her expression tired but grateful. Thank you, Archer, I nodded. Take care of her. I will. I watched them walk to the car through the falling snow, Emma's red coat, bright against the white, and didn't close the door until their taillights disappeared. I sat at the kitchen table with my journal open, the pen heavy in my hand. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, the house felt emptier than it had in weeks. I began to write. December 23rd, 2024, 8:15 p.m. 1 week from today, Julian will be sentenced. Frank called this afternoon. The prosecutor is recommending 25 years with parole eligibility after 15. I won't be there. I've sat through enough courtrooms. For 48 hours after David was poisoned, I was the prime suspect. That stain doesn't wash off easily. Julian will spend the next 15 years, maybe more, in a cell, and I will spend them here trying to make sense of what he became, trying to remember the boy in the photograph, the one who laughed and fished and believed his father was a hero. I paused, staring at the words, then looked at Kate's photograph on the mantel. I whispered to her image. I tried to save him, Kate. I did everything I could. But I couldn't. I picked up the pen again. But I can save Emma. She's still innocent, still whole. And maybe that's enough. I closed the journal. Through the window, the snow fell soft and silent, covering everything. It covered the tire tracks, the footprints, the bare branches of the maples. It covered everything. And for the first time in 2 months, I let myself believe that Kate had been right. That the first snow gave you permission to start over. Outside, the world was white and quiet and new. If you've stayed with me this far, I want you to understand something. This family story isn't just mine. It belongs to every parent who's watched a child drift beyond reach, every father forced to choose between love and what's right. My family story taught me that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and sometimes those we trust most become strangers. I made mistakes. I was too busy being the detective solving everyone else's problems while missing the poison in my own home. God knows I wish I'd seen the signs before Julian chose dad revenge over redemption. His twisted dad revenge, poisoning me for money, letting me become the suspect, cost him everything, his freedom, his daughter, his soul. So here's my advice: don't wait until betrayal forces your hand. Talk to your children. Ask the hard questions. Be present, not perfect. If someone you love is drowning in debt or desperation, don't look away. My son sought dad revenge when what he needed was help. Don't let your family story end like mine. Emma still visits. The snow still falls. And I still believe that some part of the boy I raised is in there lost, but not gone forever. If this moved you or reminded you of your own struggles, please leave a comment below. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you won't miss what's next. Your support means everything. Thank you for walking this difficult road with me. Disclaimer: this narrative contains fictionalized elements for reflective purposes. If it doesn't resonate, please explore other content better suited to you.
맞아요. 성실하면은 결국에는 그 노력은 배신하지 않는다 그렇게 얘기하잖아요. 근데 그게 이제 지치면 안 되는데 그렇게 하면서 아라 언니 어서오세요. 네, 잘 잤어요. 어제 그리고 잠이 안 오는 거예요, 계속. 그러니까 감성이 있는 것 같아요. 그게. 감성이